for, let me say that again. Good morning to everyone. Welcome. Thank you for attending. And it's happy to see all the faces online. One day we will be in person, okay? So before we go forward, do we have any minutes to talk about? Anyone want to, if you've reviewed the minutes, any edits, any amendments, any comments? Okay, hearing none, I will move forward. The next thing I want to hear, it says 10:10. We're a few seconds ahead of that. Are the public comments? Do we have any comments from anyone? And if you do, I would like to ask you to keep your comments to 2 minutes. 30 seconds before your time is up, I will give you the heads up. If what you have is too long to submit, please put it in writing, and Patrick and Desiree will still receive them, and it will be considered as part of the meeting. So,
and we don't have any members of the public here with us today. It's just SAC members and one of our co-workers, Lorenzo from OPZ.
Okay, but wasn't that a good run through? That was a good practice.
That was good, very good.
But right now, I want to hand it over to Patrick and Desiree.
Okay. Give me 1 second to.
While you're doing that, I want to say hi to Troy Belt and Anna. How y'all? Good.
Great. It is good to see everybody here today. And thank you once again for joining us and for being a part of this effort. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see this? It should say old business.
Yes.
Yes.
So several things that we're going to go through. Tony just brought up the meeting notes that we had shared previously, so hopefully everybody had a chance to look at that. We did want to give a brief reminder of the Ethics and Open Meetings Act training that we had sent out prior to the first meeting. There are a few folks that I still need some certificates from, showing that you've completed these two things. These are required for members of commissions and boards and committees such as this one. So if you have any questions about that, need links, need any information on how to complete that, reach out to us and let us know. We can get you squared away on that. A reminder also that the Google Drive has resources from the Maryland Department of Planning, just broadly resources to look at, just to understand how planning is done from a very high level in Maryland, some of the legal precedents. It kind of helps us all be on the same page with regard to the framework that we're doing this work within. And then also the Plan 2040, which is the county's comprehensive plan, or the general development plan that was adopted back in May. That is also available in the Google Drive as well. So if you've had a chance to look at that, great. And if not, take a look at that just to get a sense for how that plan is structured. We're going to be digging into it much more deeply as we go through this process. And when we get into the different topic areas, we'll be referencing different portions of that plan to see what Plan 2040 says about it, what some of the background information is with regard to that. And also under old business, this wasn't specifically listed in the hard copy of the agenda, but it is something that that is a carryover from our first meeting. Priscilla and Kate wanted to take a look at some of the language surrounding consensus and the voting protocols that are listed in the SAC charter. And so Priscilla, you have presented, or you've put together some language, and if I can, well, before I turn it over to you, let me give you this as background. So I'm not sure what page it is in the SAC charter, but there's a section 5 on reaching consensus. And Priscilla, I think that you had some ideas for replacing this section, and I was going to give this. Let me just give it over to you if I can. Are you unmuted and able to join us?
Yeah. Do you want this now? I thought we were going to do it at the end, but you want to do it now?
Yeah, I was going to bring
Okay.
it up over old business or under old business.
Okay, so let me just give you a little history on our discussion that Patrick and I have had over the last week or two. Unfortunately, I'm a purist, and that's always problematic. So consensus is a process that is in and of itself, and you don't combine it typically with voting. The problem is that the 2040 charter that we were mandated to follow has both consensus and voting in it. So what I suggested was that we use their exact language out of that charter, put it in, and then explain a little bit more about consensus. The committee who chartered us obviously wants us to use consensus whenever possible. Voting is the last resort if a decision has to be made and we can't reach consensus. So I put in some simpler language about consensus that would, you're going to post that? No.
Yeah, that's
the original. Oh, no. Okay. So what he put up here right now is what I was suggesting. So the quote is exactly what we were chartered to do. And then under it, I'll read it if anybody can't. In order to reach consensus, each committee member must be confident that their ideas have been heard, whether expressed by the member or others, and agree that they can live with and actively support. Excuse me, of course, my phone rings right now. Whoops. Wait a minute, now I lost you guys. Let's see. Expressed by, agree that they can actively support, where would I go? Whether expressed by the member or others, and agree that they can live with and actively support the decision, even if it is not their first choice. If a member is unable to support a proposal, they're encouraged to have an alternate proposal. The committee members will use a decision-making continuum. If having difficulty reaching consensus, interest levels and/or expertise, as well as involvement levels, should be weighed. Members who have a low level of interest, expertise, and involvement on a particular decision are encouraged to appreciate the views of members with a higher level. Every effort should be made to reach consensus prior to reverting to a vote in order to achieve the highest level of support for committee decisions. So I sort of put together the steps that we should be using to try to reach consensus. And one is we have the first step always is to have a group discussion on a topic with information provided by the staff. So they'll bring in something, they need a decision made on this. We have a discussion, then someone makes a proposal. Then the group discusses the proposal, and then you test for consensus. And in consensus, people would only put their thumbs up if they feel that they've been heard and they can actively support the proposal. If there's no consensus, if there are one or more holdouts, then the holdouts would offer modifications or alternate proposals. So there would be something else to look at, to discuss, more discussion, test again. And then you get into this whole last paragraph where you say to yourself, okay, how high is my level of interest and my expertise on this? Can I support this even if it's not my first choice? And if unable to reach consensus at that point, we would have to decide, do you want to seek more information or more input, or do we put it to a vote? So that voting is as far out as possible, because if there are holdouts and there's a vote, they're going to really feel that their voice has not been heard. If it's 51% of the people get to vote, and I think that's 51% for what is it, a non, what help me here, Chris, it was
for non-policy decisions.
Yeah.
And those are things that are procedural, or, when we're preparing background text for the plan, those sorts of things.
So it'd be 2/3 for the procedural.
Mhm.
And that means that it could be 1/3 of the people on the committee are not supportive of a particular issue. And if there's a vote, then they simply get overruled. So every effort to come up with something that everybody can live with is obviously a better solution to the process, and will come out with a better outcome that will meet everybody's needs. Okay, does that make sense?
Right. And so, so I think what, Priscilla, what you have put together is a proposal to replace all of this section 5 and the 9 numbered points beneath it, that are currently in the SAC charter. Your proposal is to replace it with this, which the first paragraph is just directly from volume 2 of Plan 2040, and retaining that because that is what the council adopted with Plan 2040. And so the thinking is we need to maintain that language in our charter. And then your second 2 paragraphs here, just to add some detail to the consensus process.
Patrick, could I jump in?
Sure.
I'm so glad, Priscilla, what you've done takes me back to being on the school board. Even though that was by Robert's Rules of Order, we still would have friendly amendments. We would have a conversation. So people would have the opportunity to give their input. And then at some point they can live with it, or just say, well, I'll just have to let this go. I realize I can't change anything. But every opportunity was given. And this speaks to the same language, which I think will work very well with us. I don't know at what point, Patrick, you want to ask if there are proposal revisions for what's being said. You want to have a conversation with that real quick, or Priscilla, were you finished?
I'm finished unless there are questions or comments. And absolutely, this is a proposal. This is exactly how you model consensus, right? So this is my proposal. And then if the group has thoughts or discussion, then this would be a great time. There might also be some modifications that people want to propose to go along with this or change it or something. So this would be a great time to practice consensus.
Mm-hmm.
We do have Linda has her hand up if we want to allow her to say something. Linda, can you
please?
Thank you. Well, I had a couple of questions, I suppose. If we alter our charter, what about the other regional groups that are meeting as well? So I assume that they would not be altering, or they would have. Would they receive the same language and give that opportunity for them to revise theirs also? And then number 2, do we have a comparison document where we can actually look to see what the current language is and what the proposed language would be and how that actually differs? I'm having a difficult time going from what I saw earlier as current to what is proposed. Thank you.
Patrick?
Yeah, let me answer the last one first. Probably what I can do is input this change into the Google document that the charter is saved as a Google document in the SAC drive. And so what I'll do is I'll take this language and input it into that so that you all can see this language side by side. And you'll have that, and can even make comments on it as well, propose changes, propose edits to that. And then your first question was about the other regions. The other regions are also looking at their charters and making, edits as they see fit as well, but they're all going to maintain this first paragraph here, which is that's going to be common to all of the regions because it's in Plan 2040 and was adopted by council that way. So I think really what we're doing is just providing some detail to how the the consensus process works and trying to reach consensus before moving on to a vote.
If I can make a comment about that, Linda, I think that this first paragraph that you see on your screen right now was not verbatim in our original charter. I think what Desiree and Patrick tried to do was cull it out and kind of explain it and put it in little sections. So everybody is under this mandate. And the reality is that this language should be in everybody's charter, whether it is or not, I don't know. But as long as this paragraph with the quotes is in there, that's exactly what every single region should be following.
So you're saying this is the only alteration from the current language, is paragraph, the first paragraph?
No, what they did was they took the first what Desiree and Patrick did, I believe, was take the first paragraph and instead of putting it in exactly verbatim, they broke it down into little sections.
I
and
see.
kind of
One
explained it.
through 4 here is essentially that first paragraph, and then there's some additional language in the middle here. And and what Priscilla was recommending was just simplify it, pull the language directly from Plan 2040, and then this additional here.
So the process, so I understand that the quote is the same, but the process is a process that deviates from what was in the current language. So then that is what we'll be deciding on?
No, it doesn't deviate at all. It just clarifies it.
Okay, but it's not the same language. It's not verbatim from what our current.
It's not verbatim from what Patrick
right.
and Desiree
Thank
put
you.
in. No, absolutely not.
Okay, Patrick, I see Lily's hand.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, I think this is great. I really appreciate you taking time to go through this because, you know, as Tony's saying, there are a lot of commissions and boards where this is a sticking point as you get further into detailed deliverables. I had a couple questions and then really just questions for further clarification possibly. One, is there any opportunity to present a dissenting opinion if we get 51% is, you know, out of, it could be a significant group of people do not agree. And while they might want to accept the decision moving forward, they might want to write some kind of opinion that says, you know, be aware of this issue, or this maybe we're not comfortable. This is a resolved issue. We're happy to move forward this way, kind of as a cautionary note almost. I don't know if anybody's done that in other groups. That's something we used in our Forest Drive task force. There were 1 or 2 areas where a group did write an opinion, kind of, it wasn't opposing opinion. That sounds very confrontational. It was more just a clarification or a cautionary note. And
So Lily, I'm
yes.
sorry, go ahead.
So
that's
I mean,
exactly
we
where
didn't
we
let
were
that get out
going.
of hand. We really had if there was a group, and it was kind of loosely, if it was a group that wanted to get together and write something, it wasn't like, okay, there's 7 people that didn't agree and 8 agreed, so we're going to get 7 different opinions. It was, if there was a group that held an opinion that they wanted to just put something in for the record. And I don't know how we could handle that. It seems like some of these issues we might get to that point.
So that was exactly what we were trying to do initially. And then Patrick pulled out this other language because instead of, we thought we could just stick with pure consensus. And if there were differing views, then we could present 2 or 3 different proposals
Right.
For consideration. And then, you know, Patrick pulled out this language and it said, if you can't agree, you can vote. But Patrick, I can't see why we can't also say that, you know, 1/3 of the group or a couple of people had some very strong opinions, right? I mean, we could still do that with this process.
Yeah, I don't see why not. And if we want to want to elaborate that in this charter as well, just to make it clear now before we get into some sticky decisions later, it might be a good time to go ahead and do that. But I think that makes sense. Again, consensus would be the ideal way to go. If consensus can't be reached, there's a vote process, and that maybe there's a process for documenting, a minority opinion on a particular issue. And then as this, ultimately, we're going to have a region plan product that will move to the Planning Advisory Board and ultimately to the council. And it could be that maybe the process is that in the cover letter that Tony will send over to the Planning Advisory Board, he might elaborate, there were these issues that had some differing opinions, and the differing opinions were these. And maybe that's just one way. I mean, Lily or others, you might have other ways of documenting those other ideas.
Well, I mean, I think if we were open to having something like that, maybe we could see, to Linda's point, maybe we could see if some of the other groups are coming up with a way of documenting that. And you never know, there might be a couple of groups that this opinion is still bubbling up in different areas, and maybe needs to be explored in the next plan, or just taken into consideration when some of these larger goals are moving forward. So, I mean, I'm happy to kind of work on that. If you have if you are using something like that, definitely want to do what the county is comfortable with and what's been used before.
I can check with my colleagues and see if there's anything that they've already put together as well. And if not, if we end up putting something together, we can maybe share that with them as well.
And the one other thing I had was the note about expertise, which I think is important, but also I don't know how we could capture this, but I was thinking of representation, because one of the purposes that I have on this committee is to be a community connection, and not always, go out to the communities in the Annapolis Neck Peninsula. And Linda will be, we'll work on that together, but we want to draw from a larger group of people for our opinions. I mean, that's something I really want to work on so if we present an opinion that we get, say, several community associations to support, whatever, I think that should have some weight than somebody who comes in and maybe has some expertise in another area or in another community. We're representing the opinions of a larger group of communities, and that should have some weight, or at least be acknowledged as having some weight. And I don't know how we would write that up.
Why don't we just add the word representation in that sentence? I mean, that's easy. We just add that in and say,
if that makes sense, that's kind of what that's the word I was using. But I love the way you have those, so that we are considering that when we're looking at opinions we might hold compared to opinions other people hold. These are things that you consider. Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. Next, Patrick, I don't know if anyone else has any more discussion about that. I really appreciate the different options and also the conversation. Do you want to, where are we with that right now? Do you want to move on to a last conversation about the students? You want to continue with this? Patrick, the young man who couldn't make it, but he wrote a very good 2 or 3 paragraphs about affordable housing and some options.
Yeah, I was going to move into that. So, so to put a bow on this, what I will do is I will take the language that Priscilla has drafted here. And Priscilla, I think there's one change based on, adding representation. If you wouldn't mind sending that to me, and I can we can input that into the SAC charter. I'll send that out to you all to have a look at, so that, as you mentioned, Linda, it will be helpful to kind of see what was original and then what this proposal is. And then if there's any more conversation, and we can maybe wrap this up at the next meeting. And I think we'll have it well in place before we get into any major sticky decisions.
Yeah, and Patrick, we can add that other line too, about at the end, if there is a dissenting opinion or an alternate.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
We'll
Right,
add that.
thank
So
you.
the alternate proposal and the representation. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Also,
you.
Patrick, before we move forward, I just want to ask Leo, co-chair. Leo, you have anything you want to add?
Tony, I put my comments in the chat section, and
Okay,
and Priscilla just hit that right on the head. It's just,
Okay.
I like the idea of having the ability for a small group in our committee, if they have a dissenting position that is a little tricky for us to get to the bottom of. I really like the idea of allowing that to come forward in the document, so people know that it wasn't such an easy decision.
Mhm.
right. Okay, as I pay attention to what people are saying, so I'm not seeing the chat. I'm sure Desiree is. Does anyone else have any kind of comments about the subject before we move on? Thank you, Leo.
Sure.
Okay, not
Okay.
seeing any hands. I will ask a question about the last conversation we had about students on the committee. Patrick, if you could address that.
Okay. I was going to tackle this toward the end of the meeting. Our next
Okay.
meeting is, well, I can share real briefly right now. Our next meeting, we want to put together, or we want to share with you all a public participation plan, and also a more detailed schedule for this region plan process. And one of the things, Tony and I talked at length about ways to involve students, but also other groups that are needed. We had started this conversation on the Jamboard in our first meeting, and that Jamboard is still open and available to you all. I think it's an important thing if you all continue to sort of think about that. How do we reach out to groups, to people and interests that maybe don't typically have a voice that's heard as loudly in these kinds of planning processes? If there are ways to reach out to them, or groups that we need to be particularly thinking of, let's make sure that that gets in there. Desiree and I are going to be putting together, as I said, a public participation plan to share with you all at the next meeting. And so we'll be using some of that information in the Jamboard from the first meeting, and anything else that's added to that to help fill out that public participation plan. So, so yeah, that covers that topic, and I'll touch on that again at the end of the meeting. What I wanted to do now, if I can share my screen again, is move to the main thrust of this meeting, which is the virtual driving tour. A lot of you had sent in some images and some thoughts about different places in the region, which I really appreciate you all doing. And this, we're going to do it virtually as best we can, because obviously pandemic and getting on a bus, enclosed bus in the winter maybe is not the thing to do right now. But hopefully this will work. Now, I want to keep this sort of informal, and I'm hoping that everybody will unmute themselves and speak up as we go through this. I'm expecting that when one person has talked about an image that they submitted, it might jog somebody else to add a comment or talk about, there's this other place right down the street from there. I have Google Maps pulled up in the background here that I can zoom into that, and we can talk about things. So let's keep this really informal, and I'm hoping everybody will speak up. To set the stage here, I want to go over again what is our region, Region 7. Obviously, it's all of this area, more or less from Saltworks Creek and Route 50 all the way out to Bay Ridge and Highland Beach. Also includes the community of Riva across the river from us. And what's unique about our region versus some of the other regions is we have the city of Annapolis in gray here. And the city, as you all know, has its own planning and zoning authority. So they are working through their own comprehensive plan now. And they have their own efforts and their own vision for the city. But it is something that we need to be cognizant of and coordinate with them on as well. Another big chunk of our region is part of what's called the Parole Town Center, and I spoke about this in the first meeting as well. There is a master plan for the Parole Town Center that is starting to go through legislation right now, and it basically has a little more detail on some of the development requirements or recommendations for development requirements within the Parole Town Center. But land use and zoning changes are going to be handled through this region plan process. So you all will be getting into the Parole Town Center a bit as we're moving forward. I do want to point out within Region 7, there are these 6 different communities within that are part of the region. These are communities that were delineated during the Plan 2040 process based on public input. So I'll start at the bottom. We have Riva, which is across the river. Parole, which in this case it doesn't align with what the county calls the Parole Town Center, but it is a smaller chunk of what I think people would locally know as Parole. But within the county, there is also the Parole neighborhood that is within the city, and that's not represented here as a county designation. Out toward the end of Annapolis Neck, we have Highland Beach and the Bay Ridge community, and then much of the area is labeled the Annapolis Neck community. That's in blue, but also incorporates the city of Annapolis as well. And then confusingly, there's in light blue here, there's the Annapolis community, which is basically surrounding Parole and extending out to Heritage Harbor. So those are the communities as designated, parts of Region 7 as designated within Plan 2040. So that was just to set the stage though, and I'm going to turn it over to you all in just a minute. I had asked you all to send in any images or videos of different places in Region 7, areas that we love and that need to be preserved and kept, areas that are challenged, maybe they need redevelopment, maybe they need to be improved, or maybe it's just representative of a bigger issue to be aware of. And then dream it. This is really a lot of what we're going to be doing is looking out 20 years. What is the long-term vision for this region? Is there anything missing? What's needed in the future? Are there areas that need to look different than they do today in the next 20 years? So that's what this episode or this was about, this exercise. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into it and let some of you all who submitted some of these images start to talk about what they are. And Priscilla, I believe that you had submitted this one.
I did. I submitted several pictures of the farmer's market.
And I think they're all in line here, so I'll just run through them.
Mine was a dream it on this one because I mean, I really like the farmer's market, but I think it's pathetic. It's dangerous going in and out of there. And I think there's so much improvement that could be done, as we're trying to expand farmers markets in the region. It's a very, very popular place. It's used for food trucks on Friday and farmers markets on, I think, Wednesday night, Saturday, and Sunday. So one of my suggestions is that they improve the parking. They put an egress a little further down so that it comes out at the traffic light, so that it's a safer area. And really develop it into something that we can be proud of.
Okay.
Oh, and lighting, I did put lighting in there, improve the lighting. It's,
Yeah. It is quite an activity area too. I'm gonna go on. You had some others that you had submitted as well.
yeah, I submitted some that were big projects and some that were little tiny projects. And I live in a 55+ community, and people walk all the time. And this particular street that you're looking at is, it's a city street, or a county street rather. It is not a community. It's not in the community. It's next to the community. And there is a sidewalk that goes about 20 feet and then it simply ends. And I think I put in a picture with somebody walking up the street. People use this street all the time and they are just walking. And there's a big community over on to your right, there's a big community straight ahead, the large community to the left. So you have traffic and a rehabilitation center right there. So there's traffic going in and out of that. And yet there's no sidewalk.
And this is an important thing, I think, to take it bigger than, just this one spot. Thinking in our region, where are we lacking the pedestrian facilities that are particularly needed? That's going to be something to think about.
And I did show other ones in our community, and I think you're absolutely right. It's a safety issue, and it's a development issue. If people are going to move into a neighborhood and they have no access to walking paths and walking facilities, and we want people to be out in the environment, we need to look at all of that and see how we can keep it safe for people to walk their dogs, to ride bikes. People in wheelchairs who are going up and down these streets who can't, people can't move quickly in most of the pedestrian areas or non-pedestrian areas. Okay.
Right.
Patrick, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, I just want to say this real quick. Some of the communities that are around it, even though they are not registered to keep other people out, they have been designed not to have the word is covenant. They have had covenants to keep certain people out. The people who lived in those communities knew not to have or do certain things on a person's grass beyond the concrete surface. And that's why there were no sidewalks. If I'm wrong, someone can tell me. But that is something that I think needs to be addressed so that everyone understands that these are public communities. Anyone's welcome to live there, from disabilities to people who are old with different backgrounds. And I think that's part of the mindset about some of this, and we need to really be honest about it and address it.
Yeah, hey, this is Anna here. Tony, appreciate your comments, and Priscilla as well. I also brought up walkability with the pictures I submitted, but I think in addition to safety, as Tony mentioned, it's also an equity issue, making sure people have access to various transit options if they can't, afford a vehicle, or, if they are disabled. It's also an environmental issue. When people have the ability to walk where they need to go, there's less vehicles on the road. So I think walkability is a huge issue that we should be addressing. And I'll be talking about it a little bit more if we get to my pictures, but really appreciate the comments that Tony made, and for Priscilla for raising this issue.
Yeah, and tie in access to water, which doesn't show here, but if you go down to the end of the street, that's where South River is right there. And there's absolutely no public access whatsoever to the river. So we have that throughout this county. This county is awful on water access to anybody who doesn't live right on the water.
And listen, I didn't mean to jump in and ignore both Kristen and Larry's hands, but I'm not sure whose hand was up first, Patrick.
I'm not sure. Let's say Kristen, if you'd like to speak up.
Quite all right. So I think all good points were made here. Farmers markets are vital to thriving communities. And while we do have many thriving communities here, in order to, when we think about dreaming it, we need to keep these farmers markets alive. We need to make sure that they're accessible, but they also address the food desert issue. I mean, we don't think of it in our county, but they do exist, and access to healthy foods is what this provides. So I think, Priscilla, you're dead on about needing to expand it and improve it. Sidewalks are so integral in every community throughout the state, not just here. So access to additional sidewalks is important, as is the water. But so Patrick, tell us, what's the goal here? Like, is this gonna roll up into our recommendations?
Not yet necessarily. Okay. Right now, what we're trying really just, this is just a sort of informal orientation for all of us. Okay. All of you are on this SAC. You expressed interest in being on the SAC for a reason. You love the region, you love certain things about it, you have some concerns about other things. It's an opportunity to start to get everybody thinking about some of those things and to share different ideas going forward. And to set the stage for, we're going to dig into all of these issues a lot more deeply as we're going forward.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then Larry, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, again, I completely agree with the kind of prior discussion, not only about, you know, kind of the connection and walkability, but also if you kind of go back and you kind of think about some of the ideals of Plan 2040, it really is to create kind of a more kind of connected, walkable, less car dominant, you know, plan. And I think that these kind of snapshots that we see are really kind of representative of things that we hopefully can do better moving forward in terms of planning and thinking, and as we're looking at, you know, how to, you know, kind of hopefully improve areas or fix some other areas. So to me, it's all kind of, you know, connected, being able to have access and walk to a farmer's market, or, you know, be able to take public transit to a farmer's market, or have the, you know, the inclusivity of all that, I think is important.
Okay, Patrick, I see Troy's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Troy?
Yeah, yes. The farmer's market. I love farmer's markets. I used to be a cook by profession in my earlier years, but my question is, I know during the spring and the summer, the farmer market is busy and, you know, is being used on a regular basis. But what happens during the fall and the winter time with that building facility, if it's not being used for farmer's market? I think probably we need to think about is what other use we could use of that building, because, you know, during the fall and the winter, a farmer's market don't have a lot of, you know, produce and stuff that they'll be selling out of it, or do they? That's my question. What happens during the lean times with the use of that building?
They're still open.
They're still open.
In this time of year, they sell baked goods and liquor, and
okay.
Some places have the apples. I was there the other day, and they had a variety of things that they sell.
Okay, that was one of the concerns I had.
But it could be better utilized. You're absolutely right.
But I like the way that you're thinking, Troy, because I think really, just big picture, you're talking about programming different spaces to be multifunctional and to be able to be used in many, many different ways. And we can extend that thinking to not just farmers markets, but, you know, our parking lots, or, you know, other spaces, public spaces, private spaces, all of that. It's a good thing to, I think, bring to the table for some of these other places as well. Let's keep going. I think this one was also one of yours, Priscilla.
I submitted several. Okay,
that's
so
fine.
This is indicative of a lot of, because we don't have a grid, you know, our streets are really confusing. And this is one example of a very, very confusing street. So you're driving along on, what is this, Riva, and it suddenly goes one way and you think it's going onto the interstate, but it's really going under the interstate. I mean, we need much better signage. We need signs that say not only route such and such, because not everybody knows routes. we need to have signs that say, this goes to the mall, or this goes, something or other, so that people don't get lost in our city. I mean, I get lost all the time.
Mhm.
So, and I can't be the only one.
Sure. Okay. And I think for the same area, you had
Oh,
submitted.
this is one of those dreamers. Okay, so that's all those buildings, that the mall and, all of the buildings in Parole. And what I would like to see is solar panels everywhere. I'd like to see them over parking lots. I'd like to see them over buildings. I'd like to see these buildings better utilized for housing, all of the abandoned stores utilized for housing. I mean, there's so many different things we could do to reduce our dependency on fossil fuel and improve housing opportunities for the community, and indoor recreation. Again, you could take something like the abandoned Nordstrom's or something and make it into a huge indoor sports facility.
Mhm.
And I know that that's not directly in our control, and we've talked about that when they talked about the town center, but I want us to have a big impact on getting better utilization of these spaces.
Very good. And who, I didn't write down who, did you submit this, Priscilla?
Yeah, that was mine too.
All right.
You said submit as many as we could. All these good
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
I love the Naval Academy. I just absolutely love it. And one of the problems there is transportation or parking. I think what I put down here was, we need to have free transportation from the stadium. They need to not charge for that little trolley, so that more people will use the offsite parking and will go and use some of that. And I think I put in a picture of Eastport too, because it's exactly the same thing. We have wonderful restaurants,
Yep. Right here.
narrow streets. People can't get there. If they can get into the area, they can't park. So we're losing so much opportunity for retail access. So more offsite parking with free trolleys or free some kind of transportation to get people into these congested areas.
Mhm.
So if I may jump to that real quick, Patrick.
Sure.
As far as the Naval Academy is concerned and the trolley system is run by the city of Annapolis. And I think the city and the Naval Academy have a very good relationship, and I'm sure the county does as well. It just has to be a coordination of how those suggestions move forward.
Mhm.
But I agree with what she's saying. But this, Patrick, I know this is further in the conversation today, but this is the very thing. If this is a 2040 vision, where are we going to be in 2040? Okay, I'm going to be 110 if I'm here. No, that's not right. That's not right. That's a lie. No, I'm going to be old. I'm old now. But anyway, the people who are going to be in those places are the people that are not represented now in our conversations. I'm going back to the youth again, and it's something that's so important, because think about the Google Drive. And years ago, when they just came up with the email and the web, they said in 5 years they were talking about the population, how it was going to be in 10 years. Well, in 3 years, it was that. If we don't have the young people on this conversation with us, I'm telling you, man, we're still not fulfilling our obligation for 2040 for everybody. I'm finished.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was going to point out too, as you just did, both of these areas are, within the city, but it comes back to that coordination of particularly transportation. It's a region-wide system. And so that coordination regionally is going to be very important. And what the city is doing impacts what we're doing in the county and vice versa, particularly with something like transportation.
And Patrick, I want to emphasize that the county really doesn't provide any transportation out in the Annapolis Neck area, and they rely on whatever the city is offering. So it's really important to coordinate it, because I think the whole Annapolis Neck area is almost forgotten in the conversation. because it just assumes everybody wants to drive.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, I put that one there
Quiet
too.
Waters.
But I know Lily will have this, but I just wanted to say, I think Quiet Waters and more, we have wonderful parks and we have wonderful walking paths. It's the accessibility to some of these. It's a little challenging because just as Lily just said, if anybody who doesn't have a car, they're never going to get to Quiet Waters. It just isn't an option. So we need to have more access to these and we need to just not lose these wonderful, wonderful parks that we have.
Very good.
Just a reminder of the time, Patrick, we're running down.
Yeah, 10:56.
Same
think we
issue
have-
as before, safety.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think this may be your last one.
That's my last one.
Priscilla.
That's about art. I was telling Patrick that my grandkids have come up with a list of all the different ways the cows could be decorated on Truman. And I don't know how many of you have seen these, but they're just adorable when they're decorated. This past spring, they were decorated as cicadas. But I think that one of the things we need to think about as we think about the economy and land use and so on is putting as much art, beautiful sculptures. I guess Tony's going to donate some around the county, but we need to just keep this going. And I said, there are so many cities that have these special art shows, where they'll bring in something that's unique to them. And wouldn't it be wonderful if our county had one of these displays? And then people can go looking for the decorated whatever we have, crabs or something that are on business lawns and sidewalks, so that they can just see and appreciate the county through a different view.
I would say that that's an element of placemaking and helping bring authenticity and some quality of life to the community. So, Tony, it's 10:57 right now. Do we want to take a 3 or 4 minute break at this point and come back?
I think it would be good.
Finish this?
Yes.
Okay. It's 10:58 right now. What if we come back at, say, 11:02? Would that give everybody enough time to go get another cup of coffee and whatever?
Yep.
That sounds good.
Okay.
All
Let's
right.
take a quick break then.
How's everyone doing? Still waiting for folks to come back?
Yeah, I'm just going by people's videos. Okay, I'm starting to get some people back. Let me know when you want to start up again, Tony.
Okay, I just brewed a cup of coffee. Let me pick up my cup and I'm right back.
Okay. Hope everybody grabbed a cup of coffee, if you all are caffeine drinkers.
Yeah, I maybe 2 or 3 cups a week, but when I have them, man, they're necessary.
Mhm.
This is one of those days. Let's go for it.
Okay, so let me share my screen again. This one, I went ahead and pulled this one forward, Lily. You had sent me this yesterday or today, and we were just talking about quiet water, so I was going to let you speak about this if you would.
Okay. So I love this format, and I was talking to Patrick about the idea that a lot of people, now that we kind of see how useful this is, maybe we have a smaller period of time at our meetings where we introduce a virtual driving tour point, and then we compile a complete document, and we maybe can organize it into fix it, dream it kind of sections, so that we can refer back to it in the future. And if you are driving around this month and you see something, that it's a great way for us to catalog all of our ideas and keep them together and be able to refer back to them. But I actually added a category that most of mine ended up being this time. I had a lot of dream myths, but I didn't bring them up. I have concerned about it sections of existing things. And I'll start with Quiet Waters Park, and Priscilla's right. This is considered the jewel of the parks in Arundel County. I go there several times a week for various things. I like to do something called forest bathing, and it's a real thing. And my dog and I just love to go back into the trails in the forest. And I just really encourage you to get over there and do that any time of year. But here's the entrance to Quiet Waters Park, and you can zoom in on those. Those are 2 huge fountains. They are never on. They always look like that. And then there's a pavilion in the back of it that has not been maintained. Anyway, it's so sad for me to see, as I walk into this park, to see these abandoned structures. And I get concerned because I know Quiet Waters Park has purchased a lot of property and is going to come up with a new boating access point, which is great, but I am concerned about funding and who's managing the funds and who keeps track of what we do build. I'm all about infrastructure and community infrastructure. I'm a civil engineer. So if we're going to build things, we really have to think about maintenance and the future of those structures. And my suggestion, I guess, would be, I would love to see those running. If that's not possible, then let's just bite the bullet and take them out and plant some beautiful grove of trees with the starting path through there.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to bring that one forward just because we were just talking about quiet waters. I'm going to back up a little bit. Charles James had sent some images from, I believe that this is near where he lives. Let me show you I added this aerial photo to show where we're talking about. It's the south side of Forest Drive, and it's actually right by Quiet Waters Park. So these parcels that you see are in purple. Those are city parcels, and then everything in orange is county. So this is right on the edge within the city. But his point, and I'm just going to read from his email. This construction site and road located on Annapolis Neck Road, the photos that you see are of the construction site itself, as well as the road that's along the project. I believe this is something that needs to be addressed because of the large size of the site and the very small access road that at the present time is only one way in and one way out. This will almost certainly create a traffic nightmare for the homeowners along Annapolis Neck Road. I'll be happy to discuss this concern when I'm able to meet with SAC Region 7 again. So I wanted to bring that forward. And again, just to show where we're talking about, it's the south side of Forest Drive at Annapolis Neck Road and just west of the entry to Quiet Waters Park.
Patrick, years ago, Naples Neck Road went all the way through from Forest Drive to, I guess, Hillsmere Drive, and then which emptied back on the Bay Ridge Road. Of course, that when you go towards Bay Ridge, you'll see maybe 300 feet down the road that's blocked off.
Right.
About 5 years
right here.
We're challenging, shucks, I can't find the right word, demonstrating. And they blocked off Forest Drive, and traffic was messed up for hours. Think about an accident that would happen. What was just said is bottleneck. What Lily just said, as far as so we have to have a new plan so that people won't be going through parts of the Annapolis where they'll get lost because they don't know Annapolis, and just create a gridlock.
Yes.
So this is a very important subject.
Yes.
Sure.
And also this development, in addition to the huge traffic trip generation that's going to cause, they're actually going to put a new traffic light in because this is such a large development, and that's going to cause a lot of issues. But this has become an environmental nightmare for the communities out there. They actually, the Annapolis Neck Peninsula Federation and other environmental groups had protested the lack of sediment erosion control on that site, and they're just underway. And they had to have emergency legislation at the city council to increase enforcement capabilities against these developers. And this is only the first of probably 4 developments that are coming along Forest Drive in the next couple of years.
Wow. I'm not sure about folks who have been to Europe or who've been to Europe, who hasn't, but they've been doing roundabouts for years. We're just catching on to the concept. And it seems to me somewhere along the line, as they did with West Street, Spa Road, with that turnabout, they're going to have to start working with those if they don't want traffic signals. It's a better way of keeping traffic flowing. And I'll leave it up to the engineers to decide where, but they need to be included in our conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll be hearing from our transportation folks in a couple of our meetings as well. So,
hey, Patrick.
Yes, Bino.
It's Beno Harris. Just to be clear, that project is in the city of Annapolis, right?
It is. Yes.
So historically speaking, when that stuff gets, is there a lot of interaction? I am not familiar with that, and maybe this isn't the right time. You can talk to me offline about it. Is there a lot of interaction when those projects get passed, right? So they make a decision for that type of development, which is having a negative impact to these surrounding communities, right? I think some of the documentation you had forwarded out, right? The surrounding area has like the neighborhood preservation, right? They fall in those areas, and here you have more dense. Is there a cross communication with that typically, or not?
Well, there is, as we go through, and we'll get more into this throughout our process, but we do coordinate with the city on our long range planning efforts. And then as developments come in, our county transportation folks do also look at and weigh in on some of the traffic impacts of these. One of the interesting things here is that Forest Drive, even though much of the land on either side of Forest Drive is within the city, it is a county maintained road. So there is a need for a good bit of coordination with the city, between the city and the county on these types of things. And we'll get into this a little bit more when we're talking about land use and transportation issues at a later meeting. But this, I think, is a good example that Mr. James has brought forward to us. Let's see, we talked about this. Lily, this was another one of yours at Marta Lane.
Could I just go back, if I might, to that last one? Because a lot of things we talked about have to do with, kind of sediment control and whatnot, which are clearly important and regulatory. But the real big issue there is land use. And again, I understand that there's this kind of, it's a city property versus having probably its largest impact on the county transportation system. But to me, that's really kind of part of what our discussion can be looking at is growth's going to occur. Where do you want to be able to channel it and encourage it and allow it to be consistent with some of the other goals? And, that was zoned that way. And so someone was just, essentially taking advantage of the land use plan. And so the bigger question is, why was it zoned that way? Should it have been zoned something differently? How could development, if to occur with having maybe less impact?
Yeah, these are the things that we need to be thinking about as we're going through this. Good point. Thank you. Lily, Marta Lane.
Okay,
at Forest Drive.
so again, it's very hard. I'm using this as an example, but it's very hard along the Forest Drive and Annapolis Neck, as we'll discuss ad nauseum, where the city and the county responsibilities align on these issues. This is Marta Lane, and I was at a community meeting opposing a development on Forest Drive right at the top of that street, which was going to be a Royal Farms complex of 16 gas pumps, a 24/7 mini market, and a car wash. And that was all going to be shoehorned into that corner. And this community, which has been here for many generations, came out to the citizens meeting. And it was very enlightening. First, they were opposed on many fronts to this development at the corner, but a lot of transportation issues came up, and they bordered on safety issues. So I know Priscilla was showing sidewalk segments missing. So this is right off of Forest Drive, and you can see a gentleman in the far left who's walking. There are no sidewalks in this neighborhood, and he's just literally going to step onto Forest Drive, but I felt like it would be dangerous for me to try to step out onto Forest Drive and get that perspective. So that's the best I can do with my camera. But so what the residents are concerned about is when there are backups on Forest Drive, and they're occurring more and more, people pull up Waze, Google Maps, or whatever, and see that there's a road there. And they just peel off quickly down into this neighborhood, not realizing there are no sidewalks, and the neighborhood walks out in the street. And they are very concerned from a safety perspective, beyond just clogging up their neighborhood sidewalks, streets. It's just that it's unsafe. People are out on the streets because they have no sidewalks. So as we look at infill development, because I know that's coming, going back to, I think it was Larry, I'm not sure everybody's name at the moment. Development does not have to be a negative impact, but there are a lot of details about infill development that have to be thought through before allowing that kind of zoning to come up. And one of them is, you know, if you want people to be walking, you say that's what you want. We need to embrace that and look at the places that people can't walk right now and have caused safety problems. Another one of my concerned about it.
Thank you. Larry, you had sent a range of slides in surrounding Parole Town Center.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the, I think, good and important conversation that we have is about really kind of thinking about land use, doing things to kind of improve the quality of life, safety, kind of interaction in the community. And so if you kind of go back to, you know, Plan 2040 and some of its goals, one of the big goals that has many thoughtful goals, but one of them is smart growth or smart development, where the thinking there would be is let's concentrate development in areas that maybe have infrastructure for it, that have transportation connections already in place, that encourage a lot of what we're talking about: walkability, safety, bikeability, a mixture of uses, and also you know, housing, and really affordable housing, which is harder and harder to kind of find. And so I was just kind of looking broadly at the Parole area, because to me, at least in our kind of area, planning area of 7, that is one of the kind of areas and opportunities. I think that if you are going to consider development and want to encourage something, that might be an area that has it, you know, notwithstanding there's still a bunch of traffic issues and things that need to be kind of worked out. And so I had originally kind of started looking at Parole Town Center, and as Patrick said, I know there's a master plan there that's kind of going further into that. And you know, we can, and I also, you know, could pick at things about Parole Town Center, but the notion is that it was an attempt to concentrate development in an area that had infrastructure. It has a variety of uses, not to say that it doesn't have some, you know, some weaknesses. It was trying to encourage a little bit more walkability. But if you look surrounding that area, and so when you see Target, for those of you who might not be familiar, when you see Target, the store, that right there, that's I mean, that block right in there is Parole Town Center. And so one of the things that, yeah, so there you see it. And so, you know, to be some of the things that are good is you have a mixture of uses. You're kind of trying to utilize existing infrastructure. It is compact for some elements of smart growth, and it's walkable, although for me personally, it's still a little bit too car dominant, and you got to be kind of careful as you're trying to walk across the street there. You know, they have tried to use bridges and other kinds of infrastructure to kind of separate traffic. And they are trying to, in that top right, you know, have some kind of shared public space. And so to me, the thought of that was good. I think that execution is pretty lacking and looks like an afterthought. There was a lot of opportunity there. But the bigger issue for me is that when you look across the street, and I think that's Forest Drive there, that you have all of this kind of undeveloped, or not undeveloped, but really lower development, you know, area that really has impeded the ability to kind of create a really kind of larger, connectable, walkable area. You know, maybe opportunities again, because one of the issues, you know, in Parole Town Center is that everything's expensive, especially the housing there, whether it's the for sale housing or the for rental housing. So, you know, to me, this is a kind of geography that would be appropriate, you know, for some kind of affordable workforce, you know, housing, and to be able to think about utilizing some of these underdeveloped areas that are proximate and that are within this area of smart growth for maybe a little bit more intense use, again, trying to fulfill some of the overarching goals in the plan 2040.
Maybe, did you cover this already?
And so to me, again, this is just another, kind of, food for thought. Obviously, on the right is kind of looking at some of the density of Parole Town Center. On the one on the left is Annapolis Mall, which in my mind is just so right. But again, it's private property. You have to kind of understand and respect private property rights. I get that, but that's an area that to me is extremely ripe for some kind of rethinking about more inclusive, higher density development, reuse. So anyway, and so those are and then some adjacencies there. So to me, if we're thinking about, all right, well, we do need to accommodate development. We understand that. We want to do it in a way that is smart and maybe consistent with some of the goals of 2040. Would these be areas that might be appropriate for that?
And Larry, if I can tag on to what you said, because Jonathan Hollander, actually, he could not join us today.
I saw his note. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he emailed that to everybody. So
yeah.
If I can just read it for the record here. He said, for the mall, my general comment is that the mall and the areas around the mall and the large properties with large amounts of in-place infrastructure and impervious coverage. This area is well located next to major highways and is an underutilized asset with much of the parking areas unused during the week and late evening. I recommend adding affordable housing to this area, and those residents will be able to walk to many services, thus reducing the need for car trips. I recognize that a few days of the year parking may be tight, but I also recognize the increase in ride sharing and that typical parking requirements seem overkill now that car usage has changed. This would be a cost-benefit analysis of harder parking for a few days a year in return for low environmental impact affordable housing. The affordable housing could take over one of the existing retail properties or be parceled out of one of the large existing parking areas. Worst case would be to pier the affordable housing and build it above an existing parking area. That would save many of the parking spaces, but add cost. And I believe, Anna, you had submitted something also about Annapolis Town Center at Parole.
I did. And my comments are, Larry said anything way more, way better than I ever could. But yeah, similar, I shop at this town center daily. It feels like I'm in Target sometimes. And I just really appreciate the fact that it has residential housing in it, and that it also incorporates green space, and I think the property management company hosts events for the community, and it's a really great shopping center. But then when you look across the street to the Home Depot shopping center, which I often visit as well, it just seems like there's a wasted opportunity there. In fact, I try to take a few pictures to just highlight the massiveness of the parking lot for the Home Depot shopping center, and if any of you guys are familiar with it, and I just couldn't get a good angle to show how it takes up acres and acres of space. There's not really any stormwater management practices being utilized. There's a few puny little shrubs, but no really tree cover or shade cover. So just from an environmental perspective, and an economic perspective, I just think while this is kind of like a gem, this is a really great shopping center. It just shows just how far we need to come in the surrounding areas. And Larry also mentioned the affordability factor. Those residences are within I think the cheapest one I've seen on Zillow is like $650,000 for just a 2-bedroom condo, which is like way out of the price range for I think most Anne Arundel County residents. It's a beautiful shopping center though. And I really appreciate and respect the fact that it's walkable and that they have really tried to incorporate the community and make it have more of a community feel. So I love it, but I also wanted to make sure that people knew that I think that we have a lot more work to do with some of the other shopping centers in the area. There's some that look like they are ready to be redeveloped or could use a chance to be redeveloped. And I know that new development is always an option as well.
And Larry, let me thank you both. And I'm gonna, if I may say this, Patrick, when these places were planned and designed, we were still watching black and white TV. Okay, the city fathers in Annapolis had the opportunity to bring in that area to Annapolis City, and this city was too far out in the country. Okay, so that was the mindset thinking back when the city fathers wanted the county to be where it was, and they didn't have the forethought when they had these large parking lots. They were thinking about having large malls forever and our space and a movie theater that was there. And I'm gonna keep talking until you're my age in a second. But the whole point is this has grown beyond people's imagination of what this area was going to be or could be. And they felt they could keep it closed in, and that was closed into itself, and the county would be out there. And now we realize how much we need each other. So I'm glad to hear this conversation going the way it is, because it's bringing to mind the opportunity we have. Anna, you mentioned about the cost of the town, the condos. And then this past year, I talked to a friend who's out there. She said their maintenance fees has risen 3 times. Okay, so while they got a great deal, they sold a single family home in Suburban Park, bought this, but their maintenance fees have gone up 3 times this year because of the pandemic and the rising costs. So these are conversations that have to be ongoing, but somebody has to make a decision. Have we fit this into our thinking still for what we say we're doing?
And if I could just add one more thought, you know, I go to that Target fairly often, and I love the shops around it, but they're definitely geared more towards higher income earners, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But as we work to develop and plan shopping centers and developments in the future, I'd like to see them targeting more middle class and lower income families. I know that I can't shop at Whole Foods for my weekly grocery shopping, and I'd like to be able to see access to more affordable food choices. There's a Lidl across the street, and when I say street, I'm talking about Route 2, and that's not easily accessible from this shopping center. You have to get in your car and drive, or you have to cross on foot, which isn't necessarily safe, a 4-lane highway to get to a more affordable grocery store. So just wanted to throw that out there as well, that these are really awesome shopping centers that are being built, but making sure that we're advocating for the needs of the community as opposed to luxury items is important as well.
Roy, you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yeah. Trying to unmute. Hold on.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, backing up to the Naples Mall, I know that presently, like on the Bestgate Road side, there's going to be a transportation depot hub there that's probably already in effect, and we had talked about that in our earlier meetings. Well, my concern is the residential communities that are still left on Bestgate Road, for the Parkers Drive, Gate Drive, Harrington Drive. These are still residents that still on Bestgate Road that own single family homes. And I'm all for, you know, progress and everything like that, but we still, I would like for the committee be mindful and the developers be mindful of what happens to the residential owners that are still left on Bestgate Road as we get squeezed in with all this residential or more urban type development. Now, I live by the Naples Mall, and when we do get this transportation depot, you know, my concern is like foot traffic and what happens is that we got a neighbor federal bank that's on Bestgate Road, which is presently new, but they are already having trouble with the parking lot at nighttime with, you know, young folks hanging out in the parking lot, and even though they have police presence out there to the best of their ability, but it got to the point where the residents that live next door to that bank had to put up security fences because they were worried about vandalism in their communities and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, that's some of the concerns that I have where on Bestgate Road where I live at, because I live right next to the Naples Mall, that with all this development coming on, first of all, you know, the foot traffic, how do it affect our tax base and all that's concerned. And it doesn't seem fair that, you know, people that have been living here for multi-generations are kind of getting pushed out because of all this development based, because it raises your land tax, you know, a lot with all this new developing going on. But, you know, we just need to be concerned about that. But really, we have a Bestgate, we're forming a Bestgate Community Association, like where I live at on Parker Drive. We still, I mean, we still don't have a paved driveway, turnway, where we still have a dirt road. And you know, in this day and age, we don't have the city sewage and water hookup. I mean, this year we are trying to get that together. In the past, we had tried to do it, but back then we had to have a 100% voting majority to get it done. But it's been changed now, where it's like what we're doing now with the 51%. But still, you know, I think that it's important that we need to have consideration for the present people that are living in these communities as we are upgrading our communities to more, you know, feasible development.
Okay, thank you. Leo, your hand has been raised for a while too.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple quick points about the slides that Larry shared and just follow up on one of the things that I find particularly troubling as we allow developments like Parole Town Center, which I very much like, and I do go there from time to time. But what we're looking for is how do these communities or these developments connect to the larger community? It goes back to what Larry was saying, you know, it's a lovely place and it's nice to walk around, but, you know, I think it was Jess who said that she doesn't want to cross Route 2, and, you know, who can blame her? And that's a real failure in my mind. Like, if you're trying to tell me that you're making a development that's going to impact a community in a positive way, connectivity is a huge part of it. And so I think we have to look at ways to incentivize developers to make sure that we're doing that, but also our planning staff to make sure that those needs are being met. So that's just one point. And then the other one was about what I heard about affordable housing and trying to find ways to incorporate affordable housing into these development projects. And I think as we look at what happens with the code or what our recommendations might include, oftentimes there's a desire on the developer side to go to larger buildings with more expensive units. And so, you know, one way you could look at trying to find incentives is to say, look, you can have so much height and density for a project, you know, by right. But if you were to provide more moderate or low income housing units as a part of your project, we'll give you a higher density, a little bit more vertical height to do extra floors so you can accommodate those things. So you're providing them some economy in terms of larger buildings and a smaller footprint, but the benefit we're looking for as a community is housing that meets the needs of a broader spectrum of the people who live here. So just wanted to add those two comments to what I heard so far on these slides.
Thank you. Two more hands are up, Priscilla and then Lily.
Well, I really like the direction of this conversation, because that's one of my big concerns about Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, is that it seems that we're bringing in more and more and more expensive, you know, high-end development. If you look at the Parole Town Center, other than Target, most of those stores are not affordable for the average person here. And I'm going to link that. I'm going to take a little jump for a second. There is the Lutheran development that's going to go into Forest Road and Riva. And that is exceedingly expensive. You know, you have to pay over $500,000 just to buy into it. And then it's, you know, more than $5,000 a month to live there. That's not going to work for many, many, many residents that might need that kind of housing. They're going to chop down a whole lot of trees, a whole forest, in order to have a high-end senior complex. And so we need to keep looking at all of these things where they're destroying our land and just building in things that are not affordable for the average citizen in our county.
Thank you. And Lily, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm in agreement. I'm really excited about I'm excited that everybody is participating and offering some very astute observations and opinions of how we want to see development move forward in the future. This is exactly why I'm part of this group. I did want to I added the question to one of my worksheets that just said, can new developments do a better job of understanding and respecting the surrounding older neighborhoods? I showed Marta Lane and what's happening as the traffic increases, and that is a low to moderate income community, something that we are trying to foster more of, and yet we are basically creating an unsafe situation for them as development progresses. Also, some of the buildings around Westgate Circle, I have friends that live behind some of those developments, and the way they were oriented on the property, they kill the sunlight. I know that's a much more ethereal aesthetic viewpoint, but they don't have sunlit backyards anymore because the buildings went up and blocked their sunlight. So things like that, I hope we can come up with some great recommendations to be more respectful of the communities that we're developing around.
Patrick, this is Tony again. Question for you. So after we give all of our recommendations, since this is a Citizens Action Committee, then it goes back to the city council or the planners first and then to the city council. What input will we have after we've given our recommendations?
Well, this conversation today is really just idea sharing and impression sharing and orientation to the overall region. But ultimately, when we work through this process, our work product is going to be a region plan for Region 7 with goals, policies, and strategies that will help advance planning and ideas. It'll set out a vision for what the region needs to look like over the next 20 years. And so the document that we produce will be a policy document. It won't in and of itself be regulatory, but it'll make recommendations for implementing these ideas and these goals and policies through code changes, through zoning changes, through capital improvement programs, and other, a range of other tools. So yeah, ultimately it's going to go through the legislative, the plan that we develop will go through the legislative process. It will go through the Planning Advisory Board and then the council for adoption. And at that point, it'll be in place to start to implement the various tools and things needed to implement the recommendations that come out of this planning effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just fantastic what everyone is saying. Everyone being on the same page with affordable housing, with green space, with walking, with density, because what took place on Bestgate Road, and Troy can attest to this, by the time they heard about it, they couldn't stop it. The train was going 900 miles an hour, and the buildings they planned, whoever planned to put them up, went up. And when they did complain about it, of course, they weren't heard. So I will not be a part of anything to just be a Black person on the committee or a woman on the committee or an Asian on the committee. We are on one accord. I'm loving what I'm hearing right now. And I just hope that everyone stays true to what you're saying, because you're going to be the pioneers of changing this as it needs to be. So I want to thank all of you for giving your input. It's so important.
So if I could just maybe build on that, because I think Troy's point and Lily's point are important ones of needing to understand, respect, connect to some of the established existing neighborhoods. And so a lot of, and I'm familiar with Bestgate Road, but I'm not necessarily familiar with the whole process, what's happened there. But a lot of it is really driven by, like it or not, the land values, right? And when land values rise to a point where, people or businesses or something get displaced because there's, quote, a higher and better use for that. And so I think one of the powerful things that we can do in our committee is really look, and land use to some extent is driven by zoning, right? I mean, it's driven by market, but zoning plays a big part of that. And I think that can be a big, rich opportunity area for us to really start balancing all of those different points. How do we allow and encourage and accommodate growth, but the kind of growth that we envision for the future that's a little bit more inclusive? So I think that's is a big part of how we can contribute kind of moving forward.
Thank you all for that. We've got several more slides here. Let's see how many we can get through, and any that we don't touch on, we can, I think we'll have some time at the beginning of the next meeting to finish this driving tour. Next up, Emil, I believe that you submitted.
Yeah, I did. And it kind of touched base on what a lot of people said. I used duck parking as an example, but it's really just parks in general. One of the 3 prongs of the 2040 plan is obviously green. And I think it's really just important to maintain these parks, continue to look after them, and maybe even put more in. When the weather's nice, you see so many people out there. People are exercising, walking around the park, just enjoying the environment. And it's such an important part to our region. And I think it's just something that we definitely need to preserve. It's just, the parks in general, really.
Great, thank you. This is one that I actually had submitted, and the idea here, if you can't, and I think I placed this right after what you just submitted, Emil, because it's the same idea. Surrounding the Parole Town Center, we have Waterworks Park, which is actually a city-owned property just off of Housley Drive. And then we have Broad Creek Park, which is behind Annapolis High School and the Heritage Center. And the idea here is, improving access for people to these green spaces. So really saying exactly what you were just saying, Emil, and these are 2 examples of areas where I think greater connections and getting people to be able to engage with green space can be improved. Anna, I believe you submitted this one.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight, so this is actually a picture of my front yard. So like looking out of my front door, you see, it's winter time now, but this is relatively mature forest in front of our home. I live in a townhome community. In fact, it's the only townhome community in Riva. I believe the rest of the homes are single family homes. But one of the reasons I really love my neighborhood is because the developer, I'm not sure whether they were forced to or whether they chose to, did preserve a lot of green space for the community. So as we start to think about new development of residential homes in the coming years, I really want to make sure that developers are required to preserve green space, not just because it's nice to have this view out my front yard, but because it is a public health benefit, it's an environmental benefit. It helps, combat climate change and has a lot of really great qualities to the neighborhood. So just wanted to throw that out there. This is unfortunately, this is private property. I believe in public access to green space totally, but in this case, where a developer is developing residential properties, I want to make sure that large contiguous mature forest is part of the conservation process and part of the development process as well.
Thank you. And I think you had submitted this next one as well.
Yeah, so you guys probably saw the Region 7 map, and Riva is just kind of like an island right on that map. So we're cut off from you guys by the South River. This is the bridge, Riva Road, that I drive in on every day to drop my son off at school and to take to the office. My husband goes over this bridge as well. And the issue I have with this bridge is that there's absolutely zero pedestrian access. We've seen a few joggers over the years, but it's a very dangerous road. And I just think, like, how great would that be if people had public access to this bridge and for recreational uses and fishing access and things like that, but also as commuter access. You know, my husband could ride his bike to work if this bridge had a designated shoulder for bicyclists. And, you know, there's really very, very little public access to the water in Riva and in Region 7 as a whole. So I'd really like to see, you know, by 2040, I'm sure this bridge is going to need to be replaced at some point or upgraded. I'd really like to see pedestrian access, fishing access, cycling access to this bridge in the future.
And you had one more here.
Yeah, and this just kind of talks about everything that has been talked about before. So this is a sidewalk on Riva Road. It's a really great sidewalk. It's used a lot for recreational purposes. You always see joggers and families and people walking with strollers and dogs. It's well lit, which is awesome. There's street lights relatively frequently throughout the several mile sidewalk. And the cool thing about this is, as Tony's mentioned earlier, this actually connects communities. So, you know, every neighborhood on this side of the road is connected by this sidewalk. It connects sidewalks internally within the community. And it allows people to access the amenities within those communities. So Annapolis Landing is a large community, has a large playground. My community doesn't have a large playground, but I have a safe way to access Annapolis Landing's playground. It's privately owned by the community association, but you know, it's definitely a community asset. And I think it's because there is a safe way to access that playground. So I would really love to make sure that any development moving forward or any regional planning moving forward, it definitely incorporates safe, walkable access throughout communities. As I mentioned earlier, this is more of a recreational path. You see a lot of joggers and people just going for strolls on it. But, you know, if we had that pedestrian access on the Riva Road Bridge, who knows, we might be able to take some cars off the streets as we get into Annapolis, because everybody who lives in Riva would have a safe way to get there without having to drive a car.
Patrick, we have 11 minutes.
We do. Yeah, let's go ahead and stop here. I know some of you submitted some other things, and I will hold on to those, and we can start the conversation next week with these and wrap this conversation up. We have a couple of people with hands raised. Linda.
I'm sorry, I wanted to try to catch you before you stop sharing your screen.
I can pull it back up. That's fine.
When you looked at that roadway, oh, okay, thank you. When you look at the roadway and you see the lamps, the light posts, and then you see the towering electrical wires, imagine how much more space would be there if those lines were underground, and how much more, not just attractive, we'd have better utility service, but also we would have a much broader area in which to, you know, to have bikes and pedestrians and strollers and so on. Just a comment before we move from that slide. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, I will stop sharing again now. And the remaining slides that we did not get to today, yeah, we'll have some time at the beginning of the next meeting so we can finish that up. And I think this has been a good conversation. How did you all feel about this? Was this helpful to start to get us thinking about some of the things that we'll be dealing with in this planning effort? Thumbs up. Okay. Good. I'm glad to hear that.
And I think we are all pretty much in agreement, but it's like ripping off, you know, from someone who has to drive Forest Drive to pretty much go anywhere. It's like ripping off the scab of all the various development discussions we've had over the last, well, I moved here in 2010. And so every time we have one of these development conversations, it's like we hope that something's going to happen, something's going to improve. Developers are going to either receive incentives or requirements, and here we are. So sorry, that was my soapbox. Thanks.
Well, we'll talk about all that. We will talk about that.
Yeah.
This has been great discussion. I'm so pleased. Is Leo still there?
I am.
Yes.
I just wrote great discussion today in the chat.
Yeah.
If I can, Tony, really quickly, just go over a couple of things. Our next steps, just a heads up, we're hoping to launch what's called a feedback map at the end of February. This will be an opportunity for members of the public just to share some of their ideas, kind of do a lot of the same things that we were just doing, but on a map form. So look for that toward the end of February. We'll definitely let you all know when that's live and ready. That Jam board that I mentioned for public involvement, that is still open. We will send that out to you again. So be thinking about who and how we can engage with different groups. Our next meeting is set for March 22nd at this time. There is still the survey that is available on the Region 7 hub site. So please be sharing that with members of your communities as well. And we are planning for a public forum in the spring of this year. Stay tuned for that. We're trying to put together what that will look like. And then just another reminder, if you haven't had a chance to do your ethics and open meetings trainings, please do so and save the certificates for us.
Question for you, Patrick.
Yes.
How many people do we have on the committee?
15 total.
And how many do you have? We had 12 respond today?
Here
Not
today,
respond, but that could be here because I know some folks, they had reasons why they couldn't attend.
I think you're right.
So just
12.
the reason why I'm asking is to make sure that this time frame is really working as we had hoped, and do we have to still be open to change?
Yeah, we can. I know I've reached out to one person who couldn't be here today to confirm that this won't be a permanent issue. How is this time frame working for everybody who is here today? Fine.
As a Tuesday, it's a good time.
Yeah. Okay. If we hear of anything that makes this a bad time for anybody, we'll let you know, Tony.
Okay.
And we'll go from there. Okay.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for your participation. I am so fired up and encouraged. I'm just loving this. So thank you, Patrick and Desiree, and to everyone else.
Thank you. That's all that I had. So
Great job.
Tony, if you want to close it out.
Folks, any last minute comments or before we go?
Just a question. Is there anything that you would like us to do between now and the next session?
Well, here's the thing. Patrick was hoping to get more of the input from the committee about things he wanted, but as you can see, what we had took up a good amount of time. So I think you, Patrick, you still may want to hear from other folks if there's something they forgot to say. Well, here's another area I forgot about. Like so I guess that is still an ongoing request. Okay. I think sometimes we don't want to say it. And when someone else does, you say, oh, I could have said that. So the next time around, what you could have said this time, be ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That plus if there are any public involvement outreach ideas, share them with us. But beyond that, we don't have homework this time for the next meeting. So when we do have homework, we will let you all know. But I am going to follow up with all of you very shortly after this with next steps, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Patrick, could I say something real quick to Troy?
Yes.
Troy, take a picture of that road you're talking about. I've been on this road 1,000 times. I can't picture that road you're talking about. Okay. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.